This is TWiT.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.
Big story of the week started with Gizmodo. Gizmodo last week quoting some researchers at a company called MISC, not Myth, MISC, M-Y-S-K. They found that the Apple App Store sends Apple exhaustive information about nearly everything a user does in the app, even if you have disabled sharing of device analytics altogether in the privacy setting iPhone analytics. Furthermore, so does Apple Music, Apple TV, books, and stocks. But for some reason, some other Apple apps do not. Now, as a result, on Thursday, a class action was filed in a federal court in California, saying they violated the California Invasion of Privacy Act. In the lawsuit, the plaintiff said Apple's privacy guarantees are completely illusory. Now, I'm going to say maybe Apple made a mistake. Have we heard from Apple, Jason? Has Apple responded to this in any way?
I believe so. Don't think they've said a word.
Weird. Health and Wallet did not collect analytics, which you kind of would expect for privacy, which kind of implies to me that Apple did do this on purpose. Apple Music, Apple TV, books, the iTunes Store, stocks even. Stocks shared your list. Well, wait a minute. Now, when I read this, I'm thinking, but isn't that part of the functionality? Stocks shares your list of watch stocks, the names of stocks you viewed or searched for, the timestamps of when you did it, as well as a record of any news articles you saw in the app. But since the app is saving all that information to the servers so that you can have the same information on your other Apple devices, maybe that's just part of the functionality. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah. That's the difficulty when you paint yourself as a privacy absolutist, when you paint yourself as being the only people who really care about this in this cold-hearted industry. Even when you do something that might be quite, we don't know yet, but it might be quite innocent. It might be just as you say, we are retaining this information so that we can give you a better experience as you keep using the app. But the thing is, you said that you gave us the impression that you're not collecting any information. You're not saving any information. Now we have to ask, are you creating a profile of us? And are you collecting information for your own benefit? You're just not willing to sell advertising based on that stuff yet. You're just using it to help sell Apple products and Apple services. So Apple needs to come up with a statement about this. We need to find out what they're doing. As you say, it's still early days. It's possible that this was even big companies do make mistakes. I do believe Apple's sincerity when it comes to privacy, but this would be like almost a non-story on every other company. With Apple, it's like, oh, dude, but you promised us, and you promised us, and you promised us.
You totally expect this on an Android phone. That wouldn't be a shock at all. The App Store, and this, I think it also, because it comes on the heels of Apple adding advertising to the App Store, has raised even more kind of concern about this. According to MISC, the App Store appeared to harvest information about everything you did in real time, including what you tapped on, sent back to the server, which apps you searched for, sent back to the server, which ads you saw. Of course, they'd need to keep track of that. How long you looked at a given app and how you find it. But it also sent information about your device, ID numbers, the kind of phone you're using, your screen resolution, your keyboard languages, how you're connected to the internet. Again, all of these things, browsers send back some of this information because that's part of rendering a page. Yeah.
And
also
that
a fingerprinting, right.
Right, because it means that even if you're doing something to say, hey, specifically do not use these tracking tags, I'm specifically also using plugins that make sure that you can't transmit certain information, fingerprinting of here is the combination of apps that are installed on the device, configure screen size and other things like that. It can basically figure out who you are based on that. Again, common stuff that we're sort of resigned to on other platforms, but we just don't have our defenses up when it comes to Apple.
Look, I mean, there's a lot going on here. I mean, obviously, some of this stuff is a bit much, right? This is obviously a coordinated effort by the researchers and the guy who's filing the lawsuit and Gizmodo. There is truth here, and there's also kind of like a narrative going on here. Apple knows all sorts of things about you. It's the platform owner. You're probably logged in with an Apple ID. You can only buy software from them. So they know an awful lot about you. Also, a lot of the stuff that got breathlessly described here, this is app analytics.
Right.
Every app has the ability to say what button you press, and they use that information or they throw it away. The problem is not just Apple's reputation, but that they have an option for you to opt out of collecting sort of like the telemetry data in Apple's apps, and it isn't being honored here. And I think that is the killer right now. And I don't think this is a conspiracy. I think one of two things happened here. One is it's a bug, and maybe they don't care, but it's a bug where somebody realized, maybe didn't, but that switch doesn't work. Or two, it's something that's sort of lazy, and this technology it's transmitting regardless of that switch, and then maybe they even throw it away,
right,
but it's transmitting it, in which case they need to not do that, right? Yeah. That's not a good idea.
And I think that what we're allowed to check and say we don't want to do is take that data and give it to a third party, or track us around. Right. I think that if you're on Facebook or TikTok, they can still collect all that information for themselves, still within the platform. So I don't think
first party. We've always talked about this.
First party still has.
It's worth clarifying. First party information, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Apple, Google, Facebook isn't selling information about Alex Lindsay to anybody who wants to know. That's in fact, that's their, one of the most valuable things they have. They sell aggregate information. Advertisers, they say, well, you want, users in Marin County between the age of 25 and 55, then you would fall in that pile. But they don't say, let me tell you all about Alex Lindsay. But they may know it because that's first party information. The thing is, Apple has a switch, and Misk said, opting out or switching the personalization options off did not reduce the amount of detail analytics the app was sending. Again, he doesn't know what Apple's saving, but the app is sending. He switched all possible options off: personalized ads, personalized recommendations, sharing usage data, and analytics. We're all switched off.
Yeah, it is really important that is tangential to this a little bit, but I think it is super important, which is when Apple talks about how tracking is bad, they absolutely do mean other people.
Third party, yeah.
Yeah, because they're the platform owner and they track you. They absolutely do. Your App Store purchases are tracked by them. They know everything about you and they can use that information. What they will say is, yes, but we don't share it with anybody. People can maybe and ask us to target you, but we're not going to tell them who you are. We keep that information to ourselves. We anonymize it in certain ways. They make all those claims, but it's not that Apple doesn't know about you. It's what Apple does with it. And in this case, again, is there any scenario where Apple leaks this sort of information and then uses it nefariously while it's saying that it's got a setting and that it's not? I just can't see it. This is so damaging to their entire premise if it's not just a bug or somebody not, like a bug or somebody who, like I said, is lazy and is like, well, if we don't use the information that's transmitted to us and we throw it away, then that's just as good. And I would argue, no, it's not.
Yeah. And by the way, there's somewhat evidence that they were collecting it and they weren't throwing it away. For instance, with the Stocks app, the information was sent to stocks-analytics-events.apple.com/analytics-events-v2/async. That transmission was separate from the iCloud communication necessary to sync your data across devices.
Well, but it's app analytics that you could opt out of, and if the switch doesn't work, then or doesn't work in certain apps, isn't honored in certain apps, then you would get the app analytics being set back. It doesn't really change the fact
it could be a bug.
They have a switch and the switch isn't working, and that's a huge mistake.
Apple this came out a week ago. Apple has not responded, is also problematic.
Well, I think it suggests something organizationally about how they were completely caught unawares of this and are like, why is this happening?
Right.
I don't want to be that person who gets woken up in the middle of the night about this thing, because it's like, I think they're trying to get to for them to have no answer. For them to have no answer strikes me as being, we need to get to the bottom of it, and we don't even understand what's happening here.
Right. And it could be a cloud service issue, where you're trying to make sure that all these devices are gotten together. It seems like it's way more data than you need to do that, but it could be something of how to keep on improving that. But it might be a shortcut that someone took to say, well, we'll take all this data. It makes it easier for us to make the experience more fluid, but didn't really talk to everybody involved at Apple. That's my guess of why we didn't hear anything, is because there's someone from probably pretty high up went, what the... and so everyone's like, woo, and everyone's just trying to keep their job now. So I have a feeling that it probably, the fact that Apple didn't respond, and they would have explained it in a day or two if they could. Yeah. So I think that someone might have gone, I wouldn't say rogue, I would say they just thought that this would be the easiest way to produce something, and they didn't really think it all the way through.
By the way, you may be saying, well, how could they even know what they're sending? And this methodology is problematic as well. They had to jailbreak an iPhone running iOS 14.6 because that traffic is encrypted. Apple at least protects your privacy to that degree. It's encrypted as it's going to the Apple servers. So they had to jailbreak it so they could decrypt the traffic. Then they tried the same thing on iOS 16. That traffic is now encrypted, not jailbroken. But they said it was the data was transmitted at the same time, under the same circumstances. Turning switches off and on didn't make any difference. They couldn't say what was being sent because they couldn't see it. So It's conceivable that the jailbreak, or maybe it was broken in iOS 14 and it's fixed in 16, that we don't know. That's a methodology gap.
Yeah. But it also points out that this is the problem of lockdown systems, proprietary systems. There needs to be some way for outside parties to audit what's happening on the device. Otherwise, you really just have the maker's word for it, and their PR for it. And we need to have analysts have the ability to take a look at all the unencrypted traffic that comes off the phone. Now, not necessarily voluntarily with help from Apple, but without these tools, we would not find out that, hey, it turns out that Apple is collecting information about a certain app because it wants to build again, one possibility, they're trying to build a new VR strategy, and they're trying to figure out how people interact with data on a granular level so they can articulate that in a 3D space in a much better way, but in a way in which the user doesn't know that this data is being collected or disseminated. So this is why, jailbreaking not only discovers new vulnerabilities in a phone that bad people can exploit, but it also allows some light to be shined into that black box that I think everybody needs to have.
Apple, as we've mentioned before, has a unique definition for tracking. In their privacy policy.
I did not track that woman.
Yeah, exactly. In their privacy policy, they say Apple's advertising platform does not track you, meaning it does not link user or device data collected from our apps with user or device data collected from third parties for targeted advertising or advertising measurement purposes, and does not share user or device data with data brokers. So, yes, no, we track you, but we don't correlate it with data from other third parties, nor do we sell it to third parties. But so their definition of track is not, they're tracking.
And as Jason says, a lot of this is really benign. Using examples with Google, they often do A/B testing without people knowing it. What if we move this Gmail button from here to here? Will people engage with it more thoughtfully and more directly? So a lot of this is actually pro-user, but it really is all about openness with the user to make sure that they know exactly what's happening on this device that they've spent $1,000 for.
Should also point out that MISC did the same tests with Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge, and in both cases, when you turn analytics settings off, they're off and no data is sent.
Oh, oh dear, that's bad PR.
Ouch. So
and And that kind of thing is why we haven't heard from Apple, because I get the sense what we're going to get from them is one of these, all right, we need to give you full disclosure about what went on here and why it went on and why it was a mistake. Like they can't just say, no, it's a bug that's been there for 2 years that we haven't fixed. They actually, at this point, seems to have reached the level where they're going to need to do the full mea culpa of like, we didn't intend to do this. Here's why it happened. Here's the subsystem affected. And here's our plan about how we're going to fix it. And that takes more time because, it's gone beyond the very simple, like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
and here's the $100 million to the folks that were lucky enough to file this lawsuit, and all of you are going to get 10 cents.
I mean, look, Google just paid almost $500 million in fines to states for privacy violations.
And I think we're going to continue to see this. I mean, I think that people have become increasingly sensitive to it, and with the GDPR and with the California laws, I think you're going to see more and more of for a lot of the larger corporations that I work with, no one wants to touch PII. Like they're just like, they're just like, whoa, let's not do that, because they just see it as a liability. And I think we're going to see more and more organizations think of people's personal information as a liability as opposed to a resource.
It was very similar. Google said that they have a switch, turn off location tracking, and 40 states sued, saying, hey, when you turn off location tracking, it doesn't turn it off. Google settled on Monday for $392 million. So that's also showing you the stakes here. This is a big deal, and that's just for one thing, turning off location data, right?
And California has some very strong personal information laws now that it didn't have before. And so that lawsuit being filed in California, that is a knowledgeable person who is going to be able to take advantage of California's laws about this. Whether it goes anywhere, I mean, it's a lawsuit, right? Like, who knows about that? But I think the bigger issue here is, why is this happening? And like, if I turn that off, I want it off. And on top of that, I think what we're doing right now, the big picture is you got to educate people. Like, even no tracking is, no tracking doesn't necessarily mean no tracking. Commitment to no third-party tracking doesn't mean that it's not a commitment to, first-party tracking. Like, everybody needs to be more aware of that information that's out there. And we're all gradually becoming aware of it. I think so. Now.
Yeah. But along with the awareness comes a tetchiness. And a willingness to take it to court. The Google situation is almost exactly analogous. It was in 2018. Associated Press reported that Google tracked users even when they opted out. Lawsuits from 40 states. Now here we are 4 years later. Google's paying $392 million. I think Apple's probably in a very similar boat at this point.
Yeah, and even if it is true what Alex says, that everyone, at best, maybe you'll get like an 18-cent credit for the iTunes store on certain select music titles, but nonetheless, A, that is a big check that any company has to write, and B, that puts another black mark on their reputation, and also brings them to the attention of companies like the FTC, which can start saying, guess what? You're going to negotiate with us on a consent decree that you're going to have to prove to us now that when you say what you say about privacy and the efficacy of your products, you can actually deliver on it. And if you violate this consent decree, we can basically put a Facebook hammer on you that you are not going to like one tiny bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I didn't mean to belittle that too. We're all going to get 10 cents.
No.
I do think that
understood.
Tort laws are very important. They probably have made as much of a difference as regular laws. Tort cases, because they go into a civil area where there's different sets of rules, and it allows people to create pain for something that a real need to change for companies. And so I definitely think it's fine. I think it serves a very good. It serves a very good use. I just wanted to manage everybody's expectations that none of us
absolutely
retire on it. But I do think that the tort action is really important.
And a class action could
my
be.
My father's a tort lawyer.
There's some money in that. Yeah. But then also this is a class action, but it could be a prelude to an action by the states or the feds or the FTC.
Could be.
So
maybe. But my guess is that my guess is that ultimately this is going to be revealed that there is an API call that apps do, or that switch sets that fell out But I do think, and it's happening on the device, obviously, because it's transmitting that information. But I do think one of the challenges here for Apple is going to be probably they assume that if the metrics data comes back, it's opted
okay.
into.
Yeah.
And so they've probably been using it, right? I doubt they've been throwing it away thinking that it was invalid. And I think that leads down a kind of unpleasant path for them, because they're going to have data, and are they going to have to wipe data or go back and try to retroactively? I mean, I don't know. It's a mess. And like somebody in the Discord, I think said, or in the IRC said, I hate to be the person at Apple that missed this. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know if somebody knew about it, but I would almost bet that there is a bug in Apple's radar system that says this isn't being honored. That's been not prioritized. So somebody's going to be in trouble somebody's already in trouble, clearly, very clearly.
Yeah.